Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Zodcast. Today is October 14th, 2020. Hope everybody's doing well. Got a few things to cover real quick. First of all, I want to mention, and you probably saw that last picture, and it's of Paul Lee Stein, of course, prom picture of his, and it was the 51st anniversary of his death, which was on, of course, October 11th, 1969, when he was killed by the cowardly Zodiac Killer. And didn't want that occasion to go by without mentioning it. There were a couple of tributes to Paul Stein on a couple of the Zodiac group Facebook pages, so I just kind of added in on a couple of those. I added a quote from Cliff Groth, who knew Paul Stein really well from when they were both at Fresno State and both working for the school newspaper there. Of course, Cliff also worked with Paul Avery on the school newspaper at Bakersfield College, so he knew Paul Avery and Paul Stein, which was cool. But I added the quote about Paul Stein from Cliff that said, "He's the sweetest man I ever knew," which is just so fitting for a guy like Paul Stein. I mean, obviously, I think I was only 2 months old when Paul Stein was murdered, but it was nice to actually talk to someone that knew him and spoke so well of him. And Cliff has a really good memory. He's 88 years old now, and he has a really solid memory. And he remembered Paul Stein like it was yesterday, so that was really nice. But moving on, I want to do a couple of things from the mailbag real quick. And it like takes a day for these to show up. It's kind of weird because I just saw one that came from Matt. And I think Matt posted it yesterday, but it just showed up. But anyway, Matt asked this question, which is a great one. And he says, "Does anyone know why Cheney left the Air Force after 2 years?" Of course, he's talking about Don Cheney. He says he was a cadet training to be an officer, which is a lifetime vocation, so something must have happened for him not to complete his cadetship. And that's a great point. I mean, Cheney was in the Air Force training for 2 years. He was at Harlingen, of course. We know that from the newspaper article from the Bakersfield, California newspaper that shows Don in his little cadet suit. But just reading the end of that article again, it does say that says Don will graduate from the Harlingen School next spring, and he will receive a second lieutenant's commission in the Air Force. So, Matt, you're right. That's a great question, and I did answer you back, and obviously we're talking about it now. But you see this pattern with Don Cheney. Everywhere he worked, he doesn't seem to ever been there that long. When he worked at Fluor with his brother-in-law, Don Ebersol, he wasn't there that long. And Fluor is a great company. Fluor was the type of company you would get on with. And I think when Cheney was working there, he was under a contract, and I think he might have traveled. He was doing the pipe stress analyst stuff. Of course, he was a mechanical engineer, but that might have been like a contract type job, not a permanent employee. But if you could have gotten on permanently with a company like Fluor, like his brother-in-law Don Ebersol did, who relocated not too far from me in Houston, where Fluor, I think, moved one of their major headquarters, and wound up retiring from that company, probably with a lot of money and a big pension. So if you could stay on with a company like Fluor, you were set. So why Don couldn't either, if he wasn't, get on permanently with Fluor and try to retire there? Why wouldn't you? I mean, you're set. Back in the day, if you could get on at a company like that and retire from it, but Don did. He never seemed to stay long anywhere, even when he was working for Panzarella, who was making a ton of money. Panzarella sold that company later on that he started, that Don was working for him at, and Don was basically just a hiring, firing guy, but Science Dynamics, I think, is the name of Panzarella's company that he later sold. But it was booming, and it was booming when Panzarella still owned it, and before he sold it for a lot of money. So, working for his friend, that didn't seem to go on for maybe more than a year. Of course, he was working with Panzarella when he came forward with his allegations about Arthur Lee Allen in the summer of 1971. And then at the time, that company was based in Manhattan Beach, California, closer to Los Angeles. But anyway, that is a great question about the Air Force. And who knows what happened. I want to get his record. I really do. I want to see why, what happened, because something definitely happened. He's right. You're not going to do 2 years of Air Force training, including in-flight training, and just suddenly decide to do something else. I think he was looking at mechanical engineering, Don was, before he got into the Air Force training program. So, obviously that's what he went back to when he got out. He went to Cal Poly Pomona, and studied to be a mechanical engineer. He actually had just one thing left to do to formally get his degree that he didn't do, and it wasn't because he wasn't smart enough. I think just back in the day, if you had done the schooling, that was good enough for most people, and you could get a job. But Don was a job hopper, so it just makes you wonder what was going on at some of these companies. There was another company he worked for in San Francisco. I can't remember the name. It was a air conditioning manufacturing company or engineering company. And I actually talked to the owner of that company. He didn't remember Don. Don worked there in 1965, and he didn't remember him. But that was a really good company too. That who knows why Don didn't stay there, because he worked there for a while. I think that's why he moved to the Bay Area after he was in Pomona, after he got married in 62. So in 65, he's working for that company in downtown San Francisco. Don is living on Day Street in downtown San Francisco, so he was definitely familiar with it. But you do see that pattern with Don. He's not ever holding a job for very long, and he is smart, so that's not the problem. There's something else going on, and in my opinion, he's got some kind of problem with authority or being told what to do. I mean, Don was multiple honor roll student at Bakersfield High, graduated Bakersfield Junior College, and did all the coursework at least at Cal Poly Pomona to be a mechanical engineer. Not a stupid guy. He's highly intelligent, has a lot of skill sets, but he never ever stays long in a company. But anyway, going back to San Francisco, I have a photo there, or actually a screenshot of a map, and that shows the distance from where Don's first cousin, a guy named Kenneth A. Cheney, was living at the time of the Paul Stine shooting, which was October 11th, 1969, we just talked about. And his first cousin lived about 1.2 miles from the intersection of Mason and Geary, which is, of course, where the Zodiac held Paul Stine's cab, and Paul Stine drove him to the Presidio, and that's when the Zodiac shot him at Washington and Cherry. But if Don was staying at his first cousin's house, which he knew his first cousin pretty well because they grew up together in Bakersfield. His cousin was about maybe 8 or 9 years older. I'm not sure exactly. He was ex-military as well. But he was in the jewelry business. Don's whole family was in the jewelry business. He was not, of course, but his father made watches, worked on watches. His uncle owned a jewelry company in Bakersfield, and his cousin was in the jewelry business too and had a jewelry shop in San Francisco, as well as another uncle. So all his family was in the jewelry business except for him. But I thought it was interesting that his cousin was living there that year that Paul Stine was shot at the Presidio, and living, walking distance basically. If you didn't follow the street route, it would have been, I don't know, half an hour a walk from there to hail that cab. So it's just something to think about. I'm not trying to layer on him at all, but I just thought that was a interesting fact going on about where Don's cousin Kenneth A. Cheney lived, and it lists his wife too. Her name was Ellen A. Cheney, and they lived in Bakersfield about 8 years prior. It's got both names, so it's definitely him. It's not another Kenneth Cheney, but he was living there. So that's another place where Don could have been hiding out, because obviously at the Paul Stine shooting, Don was living in Pomona. But when you consider, and this is just another thing I want to point out, when you add Don Cheney along with Arthur Lee Allen, you get to pretty much eliminate every major strike against Don when you add Allen with Don. Because the biggest strike against Don Cheney, and when you have a person of interest like I do with him, you have to know his negatives. Well, the first one is, if Don's just trying to frame Allen, why not just leave a piece of Paul Stine's shirt or one of the murder weapons over at Allen's trailer or at his house at 32 Fresno in Vallejo? And I've said this a million times. I've said it on many interviews with Michael Butterfield and whoever I've been interviewed by, because he didn't want the game to end. Either them as a combo or Don Cheney alone. He doesn't want the game to end, because leaving one piece of evidence at Arthur Lee Allen's home or his trailer would have been just enough to get him convicted. And if Allen's convicted, the game is over. There's no more fun. It's all over. Wrap it up. You can't go back. And that's not what Don wanted. I think he wanted to use Allen as mostly a patsy. And I think maybe Allen agreed to part of it. Allen passed a polygraph when he was in Atascadero, and he could have been on tranquilizers, whoever. I know I speculate there. Some guy tried to grill me once for even speculating that. Really? People at Atascadero State Hospital being on tranquilizers is a stretch for you? Come on. They were all on tranquilizers, and that probably could have helped him pass that polygraph, because The polygraph that Allen passed while he was at Atascadero State Hospital was later reviewed by another polygraph examiner, I believe for the state of California. I can't recall his name. And he looked at the results and said, this isn't right. He really thought there was a lot of inconsistencies in it. And, of course, we know the whole story about Don Cheney not passing a polygraph for the first time they tried to test him. He got totally drunk the night before, the day before, so as to be hungover the next day. What is he hiding? Of course, Bauer definitely believed Cheney knew more than he was saying, but Bauer couldn't totally go bury Don Cheney because why? Because that was just going to be his principal witness if he was going to try to ever get a conviction on Allen. So another negative against Cheney, which kind of ties to the third one, would be mailing the letters, because Cheney only lived in the area for the first canonical Zodiac crime, which was, of course, Lake Herman Road. And Cheney's down in Pomona. It's a pretty good drive from Pomona back up to the Bay Area, but Cheney was pretty mobile, as I pointed out before. But when you add, the bulk of the Zodiac correspondence was mailed from in the Bay Area or in closer to the Bay Area, except for a few. That's making him make quite a few trips up to the Bay Area if he's mailing that correspondence and somebody's not doing it for him, which of course add Allen's mailing the letters at this point. So you can clear that up when you add these two as a tandem. And it's basically, the third strike is the same thing. It's just the fact that Don did live in Pomona for 3 of the canonical crimes. So, but I think that was all planned out. Think about it. If these two guys are a partnership, they discussed calling that, the killer, if it's going to, I would believe it was definitely Don, because, first of all, the Paul Stine attack was a right-handed attack. Paul Stine was shot in the back of the head by a right-handed person. There's no way you could have done that left-handed the way that Paul Stine was shot. Arthur Lee Allen may have been ambidextrous, where he could somewhat write with his right hand, because back in the day it was a scourge to be left-handed. They saw that as bad, so the teachers would try to make you write right-handed. So you're going to learn to do it somewhat when the teachers are making you do it. But Arthur Lee Allen was left-handed. Like Norm Boudreau said, and his name was Arthur Lee Allen video, he said, Arthur Lee Allen was left-handed literally and figuratively. He compared Arthur Lee Allen to the character in Catcher from the Rye. Like a well-meaning screw-up is what Boudreau referred to him as. But he knows that Arthur Lee Allen was left-handed. So Arthur Lee Allen is not at the Presidio. There's no way. Falk ruled him out, said he was too heavy. The hair wasn't right. Arthur Lee Allen's pretty bald, so he's not the guy. If there's a lead person doing it, it's Don. And if anyone's helping, it's Allen mailing the letters. But when you do put these two guys together, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. It blows away every other suspect combined. Every one of them. You name it. Anthony, Larry Kane. It destroys them, frankly. One last point on that real quick is, if they are a tandem, Arthur Lee Allen and Cheney are a tandem, they're discussing this, before calling the killer the Zodiac. That's probably based on Arthur Lee Allen's watch that he was given for Christmas of 1967. And we don't know the Zodiac Killer's not calling himself that until late July 1969. With the debut of the Zodiac letter. This is the Zodiac speaking, the letter that had the 3-part cipher that went to the 3 different newspapers. So think about that and how rare it is. People don't write off that little bit of evidence against Arthur Lee Allen that he had a Zodiac wristwatch in 1967, which is a fact. Because that's one of the only times that the cross circle logo and the name Zodiac go together anytime, anywhere. And it just so happens that the killer emerges calling himself that in late July of 1969 with the debut of Zodiac letters. Come on. It's just too much. But anyway, I know I digress, but I'm going back to the mailbag because I can try to tie all this in. But anyway, J&F Gambler asked the question. Basically, he said, at the end of it, why the outfit at Lake Berryessa? And he basically agrees, like most people should. That outfit at Lake Berryessa meant something to the Zodiac. Brian Hartnell was not meant to be left alive. That's nonsense. I mean, if he barely turned a little bit the way his knife wounds were, he probably would have died. And I mean, he was already passing out when he went to go get help. Cecilia Shepard may have survived, but she was thrashing around just like the reenactment is. And this is the Zodiac speaking. She's screaming, yelling. She's thrashing around. Is he stabbing her? That could be why he stabbed her more times. Not, a lot of people think it was just because she was a female and that's who the Zodiac had an issue with. But it could have been because she was moving around so much. Hartnell was still I mean, he didn't move at all when he heard the knife going in, as he said, chomp, chomp, chomp. But Cecilia was rolling around all over the place as he stabbed her, which, if she didn't, maybe she might have survived. And of course, Brian played dead after his stabbing, but didn't move at all, which, probably saved his life. But anyway, the outfit was definitely something that meant something to the Zodiac. So that's such a big blow to any kind of a hoax theory with Haran and all this stuff. Sorry. Why is someone that's hoaxing this, or if Lake Berryessa is a one-off, why do the costume? And if you're going to do the costume to try to tie it into the other Zodiac, remember, the Zodiac at Lake Berryessa never once said, I am the Zodiac Killer here to kill you. He never said the word Zodiac. The only way that Hartnell knew is because he had the cross circle logo on his, what Hartnell called a dickie, the hood that the Zodiac wore. And this is Brian Hartnell's words about that. The way the cross was done on the Zodiac hood. Of course, it was black, and the cross circle logo was done in white. Brian Hartnell, this is his words: ingeniously devised. I mean, meaning this, somebody put thought in it. And I remember him saying it wasn't scrawled on with paint. It was done, and these are Brian's words too, with care. He said ingeniously devised and with care. This is somebody that it meant a lot to. And of course, maybe knew how to sew a little bit. Did Don Cheney know how to sew and make leather sheaths for knives? Yeah, he did. So that's not a skill that you need to just pass off like Don does when he's interviewed by Tom Voight and says, can't everybody sew? No. My dad was in the Marines. My grandfather was a naval officer. They couldn't sew their way out of a paper sack. Neither one of them could sew ever. I guarantee it. No, a lot of men cannot sew, but Don could, and he could sew well. But, that's kind of your answer to the question. It meant something to him. I think he was probably reenacting the Mikado because it meant so much to him. And he was playing the part of the Lord High Executioner from the Mikado. And that's probably what it was in his mind. He was acting out a masterwork. I really believe that. I think that's what this crime was. And going back to what Brian Hartnell's exact words from in Lake Berryessa, he said this of the Zodiac's physical build. And this is an exact quote from the police record. He was stout because he looked kind of heavy. I was thinking he weighed 2¼ 250. Wow, that's pretty good. I mean, that comes from Brian Hartnell. Remember what Cecilia Shepard said after she was interviewed by Dave Collins, obviously while they were still at the crime scene. And she said he's about 2 inches taller than you when Dave Collins, Deputy Collins, stood in the place of roughly where the Zodiac was. And she said he was about 2 inches taller than you, and he was 5'10". Puts him where? 5'11", 6 feet. And she said fat. She said the word fat is written down by Collins. So when people come up with all these skinny suspects, I don't know, Donald Hardin, give me a break. I know that guy has a YouTube channel committed to it. I think he probably likes to downvote my videos. That's comical. Donald Hardin is like, he's a stick figure. He's thin. He's very thin. Xenophon Anthony, he's thin and tall. Larry Kane is comical. I'm sorry, the guy's 5'9", he's 5'8" at best and about 160 pounds. These guys, when you're that far off from the physical descriptions that people remember, and that Mike Migeot, stocky, remember? Barrel-chested, Donald Fouke, Presidio. Why do people chase all these skinny people? I don't need to oversell Don, I don't. My book's out. People can make of it what they will, but why these skinny suspects come up is man, you got a lot of work to do when you come up with a guy as small as Larry Kane. You just didn't do your homework. Sorry. Why? I mean, let me read it again. Brian Hartnell. He was stout because he looked kind of heavy. I was thinking he was weighing 2¼ 250. And then here comes Larry Kane, barely 5'8" and 160 pounds. What was he wearing? A giant, one of those sumo wrestler suits? Come on. Really? It's a joke. And where does barrel-chested come from? None of these guys fit that. But Don Cheney, he was 5'11", 6 feet. Barrel-chested, no problem. Easily about 225. It wasn't as heavy as Allen. He's built a little different. And remember, Allen was pretty much bald too, so he's got a problem with the hair. So I'm just telling you, Don fits better than any of them. So I know I'm digressing a lot. I think it was because I was working on another case and I had all the Zodiac stuff pinned up in me. But so going back to some of the pictures that were at the beginning of this video, there's 2 pictures that come from research done by a guy named Peter Ackerman, and he did this stuff in 2010. And I hadn't seen it before. And I thought about it first because I remember the professor pointed out to me if I ever read a book called The Zodiac Code Solved by a guy named Seacrest. He spells it a weird way. I don't remember his first name. But anyway, that book's about studying the Zodiac ciphers and how many times the word Lee comes up, either L-E-E or L-E-I-G-H. And I've never read that book. It had pretty good reviews. Tom Voigt did the foreword to it, and that's obviously in 2010. Voigt was still pretty heavy Arthur Lee Allen guy before he switched over to Geic, and then lately, if you've noticed, he hasn't been pushing Geic anymore. Kind of interesting, because those suspects just don't hold up. But anyway, I thought that was interesting how it does come up, and that's something anybody can look at. I'm not a cipher guy at all. Believe me, I admit that all the time. I am not the cipher guy. Leave that to Aranchek. Really smart guy. I'll always defer any of that stuff to him. But, I think somebody that wasn't pushing Arthur Lee Allen or anything like that, could look at that book or what the guy's saying and at least say, yeah, this guy's just trying to push Allen, and that's why Lee comes up, are you seeing this in the ciphers or not? But anyway, it's kind of similar to this guy's work that I'm talking about, Peter Ackerman. First of all, he talks about, and I have a picture of this too, the Zodiac's Halloween card when he addresses Paul Avery. He spells Avery's last name A-V-E-R-L-Y, and of course Avery's name is spelled A-V-E-R-Y, but what the guy's pointing out is phonetically it says Aver Lee, like Lee Allen, Arthur Lee Allen. And he has some other examples of that. But more interestingly, and I put a couple pictures of this up, and I'll put a link to this guy's stuff. He has a YouTube video with a lot of it in it, and I posted that already on that picture I put up of Don Cheney when we were talking about his hair length, and a different one. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. But this guy Ackerman's talking about the Exorcist letter, and he put it under a microscope. And he's showing where the Zodiac drew what he called, like one of his G's, and he calls it a G glyph, G-L-Y-P-H, a G glyph, and it shows where the Zodiac drew it, and changed his mind and filled it in and made it look like this tadpole thing. I think that's what he's calling the G glyph, but it looks like he drew a regular G and then he fills it in, but. The interesting thing is he's looking at this under a microscope, and what it's clear that's going on here is the Zodiac's either leaving clues because he thinks that the investigators are going to at least be smart enough to put his correspondence under a microscope. And what's evidently clear is the Zodiac could definitely do fine work with what's called a nib, which is just the point of a pen that distributes the ink, and he's using different size nibs to make smaller tiny writing with these symbols and things, and then he decides to go back and fill it in, and he shows all this in these magnifying pictures of them, and he puts a glyph from the Exorcist letter, and then he puts and then he bumps up the brightness. I mean, somebody should have done this a long time ago, and somebody should do it now, because if the DNA doesn't go anywhere, what do they have? They still have the correspondence. Put it under a microscope and see, was this guy doing detailed work? Was the Zodiac Killer trained somehow to do this detailed work, which is either what? An artist or a draftsman. That's why I also show a picture of an engineer's ink drafting pen nibs set. So those nibs are those little bitty things that look like the end of a fountain pen. They're different sizes that an engineer would use before the days of AutoCAD. So they could draw thinner lines, thicker lines like calligraphy, or draw little bitty dots, or draw a bigger dot. They were in the really fine detail for doing stuff like, I don't know, pipe stress analyst drawings, stuff mechanical engineers would do, or an artist for that matter. Even Robert Graysmith said you should look into see if this guy's an artist, because a lot of this stuff is really detailed. And Don knew how to draft, of course, because AutoCAD did not exist in 1970, 1971. It wasn't being used yet. So you had to do it with what they call an engineer ink drafting pen nib set. And this goes on to say, even with the naked eye, one can observe a curious kernel of darker ink within the boundary of the larger, lighter glyph head. The third image is set transparent, dropped to easily identified concentrated ink. So he's doing something very tiny, and then he's filling it in. And what this guy thinks is he thought the investigators would find it, so it's almost like he's still taunting. So let me read what he says here real quick. I think this is on the first slide. It says, while the merit of my entire presentation does not rest on the hypothesis of ink texture within a single glyph, Again, I would be interested to learn what a professional forensic document examiner with original specimen under scope makes of this phenomenon. I propose that the concentrated, darker ink within the tadpole provides trace evidence that the Zodiac initially drew a smaller shape of a greater resemblance to the other slackened G's in the Exorcist letter and in the Red Phantom letter. And he also has a side of the Red Phantom letter. I don't think I have that one. And in the next slide I show, and then this will be in the link to his stuff as well, it says Zodiac's Exorcist letter, closer inspection. And it shows this stuff really magnetized. The largest one is 16 times magnification. It shows, like a giant dot. And this is microscopic. I mean, to see this little thing in it, you have to have a microscope. And it looks like a J or an I or something in there. And he says, magnification of lower left page dot, centered in the ink dot, there appears to be a sharp, light-colored symbol formed by 3 thin, straight edges meeting perpendicularly to form 3 right angles, with indication of a nascent fourth. Examine for yourself the high-res color scan of the Exorcist letter. Increase your web browser zoom level, try 400%. Scroll over the ink dot. What do you see? Consider the possibility that the Zodiac, with pinpricks on a page, fine nib, blade, or stencil, intentionally micro printed this symbol, and that it was intended as an alpha character depicting capital I in light ink and scratched substrate of the paper medium. Now, I don't know every technical term this guy's using, but I see what he's saying. This is very detailed work, and he's using a nib. That's the most important part. So I definitely think this guy's work's pretty interesting. And obviously he was, he's thinking it was Arthur Lee Allen for whatever reason, but Arthur Lee Allen's never been proven to have any kind of art training or engineering drafting training whatsoever. So obviously that points more to Don Cheney. And, somebody can do that, or an artist. Well, Don Cheney's daughter, the one they, talk about with the whole incident with Allen, is a comic book artist. Isn't that interesting? But it's definitely worth looking at this guy's work. I think it's good any way you look at it. And I was going to mention at the beginning of this video, but my friend Ned over there at Black Box Online Radio, one of his more recent videos was called Zodiac What If? And when I first saw his title, I thought maybe it was about a lady who wrote a book that's called Zodiac What If, and it's about the possibility of a D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, being the Zodiac Killer. I've never read that book, and so I'm not going to judge it or not. I know D'Angelo, totally different profile than the Zodiac Killer. D'Angelo was one twisted guy. He was a rapist. He was just real sadistic. The Zodiac wasn't. It's just not. I mean, you have to throw the criminology book into the trash can if you think the Golden State Killer was the Zodiac, in my opinion. But like I said, haven't read the book. But anyway, it was more, I think, where Ned was going with it. And after listening, great upload, by the way, Ned, was, what if, we find out tomorrow who the Zodiac Killer was, and these people that have written books, and, they're wrong. What are you going to do now? You've been proven wrong, and you got all this work into it. Well, thanks for not, mentioning my name specifically, Ned. And I know you weren't even thinking about me, but first I'll state that I haven't been doing this for that long. I mean, 2 years ago, I knew the basics of this case, but I didn't. So I don't have years invested in even Cheney. It's, my whole story, and most people that follow this channel know. I picked up on Cheney after watching, his name was Arthur Lee Allen, and the guy had me at I licked the man's stamps, okay? I heard when he said he licked the man's stamps, and that's what he claims he did. To me, I'm thinking you're afraid of the DNA. One way or the other, you're afraid of the DNA. Of course, they tested Don's DNA. It was negative, but we later find out that it came from the outside of the stamp, meaning that Arthur Lee Allen's still in play. Everybody's still in play. It's San Francisco Crime DNA Lab, which is a disaster. I mean, they convicted a lot of people on bad DNA that got off. I mean, there's more to that story that's even being let out, how screwed up the San Francisco DNA Lab was. But the Zodiac's DNA, outside of the stamp, could have been anybody, including the mailman. 4 out of 9 markers. It's very weak. Bad evidence collecting. And, I only know that they tested Don's through some other source of a book, but I just take it as that it is negative. So why not? And I've wrote my book keeping that in mind because there's so much other evidence for him. But anyway, If I found out that tomorrow that the Zodiac's somebody different, I mean, I guess if it's Larry Kane, I'll look pretty bad. But you know, I would be pretty shocked if it wasn't Don or some involvement with Allen crossed over or whatever. I would be pretty shocked. But you know, if people want to come tar and feather me if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I feel pretty solid about it. I really do. You know, I'm probably. I know when Ned talked to me and you asked, you know, how confident I was in Cheney, I would say I've been 90%. I'd say now I'm probably 93, 94%. I really am. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But there's a lot of anomalies in cases. But that was a great upload and a great question to ask, because so many people do. They have years and years into a suspect in a case. You know, I mean, this is my contribution. I know some people don't agree with me, but they said, but you know, they do agree that Don needed to be looked at further. And I don't feel guilty about it, because even if Don Cheney's not the Zodiac and Arthur Lee Allen's not the Zodiac, then Don lied. I mean, any way you look at it, because it's like Grace Smith said, if you believe what Don Cheney says, then Arthur Lee Allen has to be the Zodiac. And I agree with that, but I don't believe Don Cheney. He's changed his story way too many times. And even if you don't believe Cheney was the Zodiac, he altered this case forever when he brought forward Arthur Lee Allen in the summer of 1971 as a suspect, because it completely diverted any attention away from somebody, you know, them maybe finding the real Zodiac, because all that focus went into Arthur Lee Allen for so long, so many years. And without Cheney bringing forward Allen, you don't have Grace Smith's books, you don't have the Fincher film, and it's not near as popular as it's become today. So Cheney definitely diverted this case any way you look at it. If he accused his friend that was innocent of it, he's a bad guy too. So, and obviously his story changed so many times. Told Tom Voigt he never heard of Blue Rock Springs Park, and then years later says he vividly remembers Allen taking him through Blue Rock Springs Park. That's just one instance, and everybody knows all this. So no, I don't feel guilty at all. Even if it didn't turn out to be Don, I feel no guilt whatsoever because of what he did. But that's it for this week. Stay tuned. Please like and subscribe. Sorry, I was a little all over the road, but hopefully it was a good number 10 here. Thanks.